Mo, nice to see you. It's been a while. Awesome. Well, I think we'll get started. It's got lots to cover today. So firstly, I wanted to just say, welcome to all of you to the Break Through Burnout Forum. So this, is a forum where together we can deep dive into what actually, really helps us to stop burnout in its tracks and keep it at bay long term. So, firstly, I just want to acknowledge all of you for showing up today and taking the time to prioritize yourself. It's a really meaningful step to making lasting change. And so I'm so pleased that you are here today. In terms of agenda, I'm going to spend kind of 15 to 20 minutes or so covering some content around the multifaceted nature of burnout. And then the remainder of the session is all about your questions. So whilst everybody's burnout experience is totally unique, there's no doubt that there will definitely be some shared concerns or challenges among the group. So what you have to share will very likely resonate with others, and your questions could not only benefit you, but also others here too within the space. So I encourage you to be brave and ask anything that is on your mind. A couple of small bits of housekeeping. So I'd love for you to have the chat open so you can connect with me and also each other within the session. And if there's any questions that kind of come up for you as I am talking in the first part of the session, then please feel free to just put it straight into the chat. And I will come to it in the Q&A sessions. I know sometimes you can have a question and you're like, if I don't put it in the chat, I won't remember. So please feel free to put it in there. And then I also kind of one last invitation is for you to kind of close down your emails, put your phone on airplane mode, close other tabs, so you know that you can really give yourself the time to focus on the session today. Any questions from anyone before I get started? Oh, fabulous. Okay, so without further ado, let's get cracking. So let me move it so I can see you all, your lovely faces. Brilliant. So, burnout is really more complex than many of us think. But why is it important to know that, and why does that actually matter? So I know that everyone in this room is a professional. You spend your working days tackling problems, solving problems in all different shapes and sizes. And I know that tackling straightforward problems generally involves simple solutions. But more complicated challenges need something a little different. So to tackle those effectively, we need to identify and deeply understand all the pain points that are presenting themselves to us. And then armed with that information, we can disentangle the noise and really think about what is the root cause. If we don't understand the problem, what we try to use and solve it might not be the solution that we need, or it might not have a material impact, or we risk just kind of treating those surface level symptoms and not tackling the root cause. So to tackle that complex problem that is burnout, we're going to first acknowledge it's complex and then understand it deeply. And that's why we are here today. So before I kind of go into why is it really complicated and complex, I want to just give you some assurance that because it's a complex problem, that doesn't mean that solving it requires something really monumental or really complicated changes. It's not the size and the scale of the solution that matters, but it's about finding the right solution for you. And I also want to kind of reassure you that, because what you've tried so far might not have helped, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're not capable of breaking through burnout. In my own personal experience, when I was burning out, I would, tend to berate myself for being not able to, snap out of it. Oh, I just need to work a bit less. I need to prioritize my well-being. Why can't I do that simple thing? If you can relate to that, then please know it's not because you're not capable of finding the solution. It's that burnout is not straightforward, but you are capable. If I can, then you can. So let's kind of explore a little more about some of those complexities. Firstly, burnout is not clear cut. It's not as simple as you're burnt out or you're not. It is much more nuanced than that. There are kind of varying degrees of feeling burnt out, and it happens to us really gradually over time. Now, why does that present a challenge? Well, it makes it really difficult to pinpoint that root cause. As some of you on the call may know, my husband is an osteopath. So I kind of use an example from his world that if maybe you're playing netball or you're playing football, you might accelerate towards the ball and, like pop, you get that big pain in your knee. You can pinpoint the moment that it happened, and that helps you to plan your rehab and then come back stronger. But burnout itself happens over weeks, months, years. And in that time, multiple things happen and change and evolve in your life at the same time. So that makes it really difficult to pinpoint that root cause. The other part of its gradual nature means that it's actually even harder to spot that there's a problem at all. As humans, we are super adaptable and we learn to evolve with how we're feeling. There's not always that sudden shock factor, that 0 to 10 knee pain that jolts us into knowing we need help or to start doing something. So we need to be really aware of the signs for us individually and check in with ourselves regularly to know how to take action. And I'm going to talk a little bit more later on the signs, including some of the lesser known signs and what that means for us. As individuals, we are not just about how much we work, and nor is burnout. For me, the biggest myth out there is that burnout is only driven by workplace stress. In fact, the World Health Organization actually only defines it as workplace stress. But we face stresses in all areas of our life. As some of you have mentioned already on the call, we are your parents. There are many pieces of the puzzle that make us up as individuals. We're colleagues and employees, sure, but we're friends, husbands, wives, partners, leaders, role models, teachers, mentors, parents, brothers, sisters, sons, daughters, and caregivers. And so thinking that burnout only results from work is only showing us kind of that one piece of the puzzle. And looking more broadly can really help us to spot some of the patterns that can give us insight into the drivers or the root causes of our own personal burnout. For example, is there anyone else in the space here who's been described as a people pleaser? Maybe raise your hand or type a P in the chat if that is you. Yes, hello, me too. And this trait for me was way more apparent when I looked at my family and my social life. And it was only when kind of taking that broader lens that I could see how that was contributing to my burnout, in that I put my personal needs last in the queue of priority. But looking at that broader lens as well, we can also open ourselves up to solutions being outside the sphere of work too. So that's the puzzle piece that's on this slide. But why on earth, Tonya, have you put an onion on this slide, you might think? As Shrek told us very wisely, onions have many layers, and so do we, and so does burnout. So if I use my own kind of personal experience as an example, if I looked only at the surface, that told me that the cause of my burnout was I was working too many hours. So there were things that I tried to solve that. I would diary block some me time and then just ignore it in my calendar. I would take 2 months off traveling where I felt rested. Well, I was right back where I started a couple of months later. I would try and find a role that demanded less hours, but I would still be working past the clock off time. Or I tried to change jobs, but it was a different place, same story. And this is because I wasn't delving under the skin and peeling back those layers to really understand why I was susceptible to burnout. Asking those powerful questions like, what is this really about? Why am I working so many hours? And what am I telling myself about why I should, need, or have to work so many hours? So I'm going to put the puzzle and the onion layer analogy into a real life example. So again, using my personal experience, why was I working so many hours? Now, the first layer of that was, because having a successful career was and still is extremely important to me. And that in itself isn't a problem. So I had to go deeper and explore a little bit more. I had to look at different areas of my life and ask myself, where had I learned what it meant to be successful and what it took to be successful? And so I looked outside of the work and, delved more into my education. So there I learned that success meant results. I had to produce A-star grades, and the way that I'd learned to get those results was through hard work, hard graft, sacrificing school holidays for revision. Essentially, I learned that to achieve was to struggle. And the only way I knew to be successful was hard, through long hours and sacrifice. I didn't know any other way. And why is all of that important? Well, when you really boil it down, burnout is a function of what you tell yourself about yourself and also how you approach what you do. So the good news of that is that it's possible to change that narrative and also learn other ways of operating. I could learn how to achieve that success differently. And now the last kind of facet around the multi-dimensional beast that is burnout that I want to talk about today is some of the different but kind of lesser known ways that burnout can manifest itself, aka the dimensions of burnout. And now the first clinically based measure of burnout measures these 3 different dimensions. The first one is exhaustion. So this is where you feel constantly depleted. And this one is perhaps the most widely recognized burnout experience. And that can be both physical or mental exhaustion, where everything feels overwhelming. And that can be a result of being part of an always-on culture or taking on too much at work, at home, in family relationships or caregiving circumstances. But burnout can also manifest itself in other, perhaps lesser known ways. One of those is around cynicism. So this is where you start to feel kind of detached from your job or the people around you. You might feel disconnected or you lack empathy. And it's really being getting that feeling where what you're doing no longer matters. What's the point? Another dimension is around ineffectiveness. And this is where you might feel that you're never able to do a good enough job. Tasks that used to be a breeze, they suddenly feel insurmountable or extremely challenging. And more often than not in this circumstance, you are being effective, but it's just your perception that is not. And again, why does it matter? Why do we need to know about these dimensions? Well, you might experience one of these dimensions only, or you might, somebody else might experience a blend of the two, or you might in fact experience all 3 of them. So maybe you can let me know in the chat, which of these resonate with you in particular. Do you feel 1 or 2 or all 3 of them? So, it's really important to kind of recognize exactly, Anita's all 3 at different times. I absolutely hear you. Exhausted and a bit cynical. That cynicism, ineffectiveness for you, Anthony. Yeah, all 3, Michael. And it's really good that you guys are recognizing that you're feeling all 3 of those, because what you can do with that is then explore the extent to which you feel those, perhaps comparatively. These feelings aren't mutually exclusive, but if you recognize which of them resonate most for you, then that can give you a really powerful place to start in peeling back the layers of the onions and exploring what might be driving that feeling. And each of these dimensions, importantly, requires a slightly different tactic or solution to counter them. So knowing which one you feel the most allows you to target your efforts on solutions that will make the biggest impact. So again, let me kind of bring that to life with a real example. If you're in that space where you're feeling ineffective, that you're not able to do a good enough job, if indeed you're delegating away tasks and responsibilities, in order to try and reduce that burden, that might actually in fact exacerbate that feeling that you're not good enough. You're not good, so you have to give away those responsibilities. But in fact, it might help actually that you take on some tasks, in particular ones that leverage your strengths. And then that can be the counter, because that helps you to build evidence on some things that you can do and that you can do well. Another great counter for that ineffectiveness piece is taking up something new. There's kind of a curve that I'm sure we all know when we're learning, that you, at the start, when you're learning a new skill, you learn really rapidly, and that can be really, good for building confidence. So ultimately, what I'm trying to say with these dimensions is that these matter when it comes to finding those solutions that are right for you. Okay, last bit. So what do I really want you to kind of take away from all of that? Well, first thing is, don't be hard on yourself if you've not yet managed to find the way that's worked for you to break through burnout. It is not a straightforward problem to solve. If it was, then burnout would not be such a prevalent issue as it is today. Next, it's important for you to kind of check in regularly with how you're feeling and observe what's going on. And so that beast of burnout doesn't creep up on you. Also encourage you to look outside of work for possible drivers and also possible solutions. Try and peel back those layers. Ask why. Why is it that you might be feeling burnt out? What is it really about? And what are you telling yourself in that space? And then finally, to delve into these dimensions. This is where there's a lot of gold. You can spot burnout more quickly if you're aware that there are 3 different types, and it's not just all about I'm feeling physically drained because I've been at my desk for a large number of hours. And most importantly, diving into these dimensions can really help you find the solutions that can make the most meaningful impact for you. So that is the dimensions, and that's why it's complicated. And now, as I mentioned right up front, I want to kind of turn this over to you and let me know if there are any questions or thoughts or feelings that have come up as we've talked about all of that. Any questions from anyone?
Not so much a question, but maybe something that resonated with me just from what you were saying there. I liked the examples for remedies for ineffectiveness that you gave. One of them, you were talking about, taking on new tasks and, doing something new. I think what you were saying is, initially you see rapid development in doing something new that's, unknown. So the maybe you get a bit of a sense of achievement or effectiveness to your third point there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that resonates with me. I mean, not to bore people, but I've been doing the same profession for 11 years. And maybe the first 6 or 7 years, I really felt, rapid growth and development, and then kind of plateaued a bit. And I think that's where a lot of my feelings and reason for joining the call are coming from, that feeling of, flatness and not progressing. So I don't know, one of the takeaways from what you were saying there is to maybe try and broaden some of the tasks that I do to maybe reignite those feelings.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing. And yeah, I couldn't encourage you more to do that, to kind of, and it's not often that we kind of sit in a moment as well and think about, like, what are my strengths? Like, what am I, really good at? Some might argue that if you have a performance review structure at work, you are encouraged to do that, but it's very much focused on, or in my experience, it was very much focused on, okay, what are my strengths in terms of what I can give to the company, not necessarily about what are my just genuine strengths broadly. What am I really good at? because then you can, if you know that, it can really help with that feeling, that getting that buzz, that energy to just do more things that you're good at, and help kind of build up that confidence, and as you say, kind of reignite that spark. Thank you so much for sharing, Anthony. And it was interesting for me to see in the chat that actually I think pretty much all of you mentioned that ineffectiveness piece is something that you resonate with. It's not talked a lot in the burnout space. That I never know how to describe it aside from that like meh feeling. That is really part of feeling burnout. Danny, I'm just going to look at your question in the chat, so forgive me, I have to look over to the side. Loving the onion, brilliant. It is, and again, my personal experience was, I got loads of really well-intended advice from people like take a rest, take a break, take a holiday. Like, fine, I did those things, but it didn't get under the skin. It didn't get into the layers of like, why am I feeling about this? All it meant is, maybe I took some time off. I probably spent the 4 days of the week that I took off thinking about work still, or still feeling all of those feelings. I talk about work a lot because that was my personal experience. That's where my burnout generated from. But, even as a parent, taking a holiday, those responsibilities don't necessarily disappear. Sadly, holidays are different now. But I was still in that space of thinking about work, or if I'm honest, the majority of the time people would tell me to take time off, and I would just sit there going, actually, this is a time where I can secretly, behind this gaze of being off, I can get through my to-do list, because thinking that would make me feel better. But it's actually about peeling back those layers. Why is it that I am operating like this? What is it really about? What is it really about? Yeah, and that acceptance piece, Danny, that is, it's hard. If I work with a number of clients who kind of feel a little bit of that shame around not wanting to say, I'm feeling burnt out, I'm perhaps feeling like I'm not coping. Again, I've worked with a number of people who have feel this need to be like, I am the go-to person. Excuse my French, get shit done. That's how I define that I am valuable. That's where I get my worth from in terms of work. I get shit done. I make results. That's what I do. And so acknowledging and kind of openly saying, like, actually, I'm not coping, I'm not able to do that, is that runs deep. That's really difficult. It's really challenging, but helping yourself kind of again, asking those powerful questions. What's that really about? Where else is my worth coming from? Where else can I be valuable? How can I be valuable, but differently? What is it really about? The best question to ask yourself, Danny. Love that. Michael, would you suggest being more open about burnout to work with managers? If not, how will you suggest coping if no one really knows what you're going through? Thank you for being so vulnerable, Michael. That's extremely brave. In my experience, yes, I would suggest being open with your managers. If they don't know, then they will just carry on operating in the same way that they are. The flip side of that is, I would say, is it's really good to open up to them and make them aware, but it's just also be aware that they might not have the tools to be able to help you kind of work through what's going on there. So in those scenarios, I would consider, getting some more external help, from a professional who can help in this space. But I think the important thing is to be open so that they can be aware, and be open specifically about what you're feeling. So if I kind of take it back to those dimensions, if you are feeling that ineffective example, if that's how you're feeling, it's really important that you're open with them and that's how you're feeling. Because in their experience, it might be the case where they do, okay, Michael's telling me he feels a little bit burnt out. So in which case, I'll take responsibilities off his plate. I will take those things away from him so that he can have more free space, etc., etc. And actually, as I mentioned earlier, that can feed the beast ultimately. Anything else kind of specific? Have I answered that question for you, Michael? Hope so. Let me know in the chat or come on and ping. Brilliant. Just before I go, Jen, I'll come to your comment next, but just kind of before that, I want to take the time so that, you know, if there is anything that really resonated with you in particular today, and you need perhaps, you know, want a space to peel back the onion layers or delve into those dimensions a bit more deeply on a one-to-one basis, then I've got some slots available for a one-to-one strategy session. And I will put the link in the chat for you to book some time in your calendar. These are totally free sessions, so you can just come into the space and we can explore that together. Okay. So, dog's getting involved with us now on the workshop. Fabulous. Jen, from what Daniela has said, I'm also conscious to acknowledge when I'm not feeling 100% in order to address it. Yes, power to you, Jen. I know you've worked really hard on that, so well done. For me, I'm an overachiever and perfectionist, so it's difficult to take a step back and stop. Absolutely. I hear you. Recovering perfectionists in the house, I am here with you. And Jen, I think the thing that you've kind of really acknowledged and picked up on there as well is you have that awareness now that is a big driver for you. And so going back to it, you know, what does that mean for you? Well, that strategy for you to help you overcome that perfectionist piece, that is a very different strategy to what it would be if you were feeling ineffective. It might be that we need to work out, how do you get comfortable at operating at 80%? How do we get that feels good for you? Because again, me, in my personal experience as an overachiever, that used to sit horribly with me. No, there's no options for how I can operate less. That won't make me feel comfortable. So it's about understanding what's going to make you feel comfortable so that you can achieve and keep away from burnout longer term. And to your next question, could you give me some examples to tackle too? Yes, I can indeed. Pens at the ready. I see it. Excellent. So a really good, that cynicism piece, a lot of it goes back to that question. Well, you cannot be asking yourself that question, like, what is the point of all of this? Why am I doing that? What's the point? So for me, really good strategies there are thinking about how do you reconnect with your why and and by this why I mean your purpose. So thinking back to when you were in a space where you felt really lit up and excited about your work or your life or wherever it's going on for you, what was happening? What were you doing? And so then you can think about, how can I take steps to get closer back to that? Another kind of link to that piece that's really important is to spend some time thinking about what your values are. Values can be a funny question. Again, I used to always think of them personally. Historically, I would think about them in a work context. One of the companies that I had when I started as a graduate, I think the values were, what's the word, kind of whitewashed into my blood. I knew the company values off by heart, but, you know, I didn't necessarily take the time to sit back and think, what are my values? What's really important to me? And when you know that, again, it's about working out how you operate more in that space where you are aligned with those values. And that's, you know, outside and inside of work. If a huge priority, one of your values is about, empathy. That was one of mine, and it still is one of mine. And that's where I would really get frustrated when people were giving me this advice. I would often get, oh, Tonya, just care a little bit less, and then you won't feel so stressed out. So I'm sorry, but that is not going to work for me, because it's fundamental to me, and it's important that I care. I care about my clients and I want to deliver for them. So that's not going to work for me. But then it was about exploring some of my other values and how I could make sure that I would leverage those values and do more of that, but in a healthy, sustainable way. Does that make sense, Anthony? Any other questions on that? Awesome. Nitas, I can resonate with the overachiever perspective. I know you can. Having worked with you very closely, you're smashing it. It's hard. I'm actually going to be doing another session in this series that is all around some of the blind spots for high performers. So, what are some of the things that perhaps we don't recognize as a high performer, and how does that impact burnout? So watch this space, and maybe you can join that session. Danny, can you offer any tips on exhaustion? Yes. I hear you also in that space around sleep doesn't even make it better. On this one, I think it's important to consider the type of rest that you might really need. So sleep is amazing. I won't deny that. But that's very much a physical rest piece. There are, I'm sure you can Google it, but there are seven different types of rest. And so, some of them, for example, are emotional rest. And there's all different types of, some social rest. If you're an introvert, for example, I don't like black and white labels, but it's nice and easy to explain. But if you're an introvert, getting that social rest is really important. That time and space by yourself, not doing anything in particular, just being in your own company. Whereas an extrovert, rest for them is not high on the priority. So it is thinking about what type of rest is it that you are really after. And to help you do that, I would say a really good kind of tip that I often use is around using a notepad or something, but throughout your day, try it for a week or so, and really at the end of the day, just get specific on what are things that gave you energy. So what tasks or things were you doing that you're like, oh, that made me feel that like feeling inside, or like you did it and you're like, God, yeah, I felt really good after that. And then equally on the flip side, also record some of those things, what was really depleting. Now, the trick to that is also is getting quite specific. So for example, I have lots of clients who come to me and sort of say, work is exhausting me. Yes. But what is it about work? Which parts of that are really exhausting? Is it difficult interactions? Is it time sat by yourself behind your computer? Is it being on constant Zoom meetings like this one you've invited me to, Tonya, God's sake? It's everybody's different. And so it's getting into the specifics about what is making you feel drained, so that you can then take a look at the balance. How can you, and ask yourself, a question, how can you get a little bit more of those energizer things into your space? And how can you let go of some of those depleters? Make sense? Fabulous. So just a kind of last reminder before I take any other questions, there is a link in the chat there if you want to explore any more of these bits and pieces with me in a one-to-one, so we can go through some of the ideas that we've talked about in this session, and create a plan specific for you on how you can start to kind of tackle some of these things. We can peel back those layers and think about what's the action plan for you going forward. Brilliant. Any other questions, thoughts, experiences from the room? Just one final question that has come into me privately that's worth just me mentioning. You guys are and it sort of taps into what Michael was talking about earlier, but I'm aware that, lots of you will be people managers as well, or caregivers. But specifically in the kind of people manager place, if people in your team are coming to you with these feelings of burnout, how can you help them? Now, I would say, first of all, remind yourself that it's not your responsibility to entirely solve their burnout, because it would be very specific to them. And though you might be able to help them, sometimes if you don't quite get it right, then it can actually cause a bigger challenge. So the best thing that you can do is hold space for those that you work for to just come and speak to you with no judgment. Just let them speak about what they're feeling and really listen to them, and then think about asking them to seek more specific and professional help. It's hard, as people managers, we also have to protect our, your own energy, because it kind of comes under that. It's a lot of stress for you to take on somebody else's stress too. So help them, serve them the best way you can by giving them the space. It's partly why I wanted to create this forum, because there's a lot of research out there that actually talks about just having a space to come together and share experiences. And burnout can be a super lonely place, but knowing that there's other people going through it does have a really big impact in itself. So give them the space to share, and then perhaps encourage them to think about where they can seek additional help. Fabulous. Any other lasting thoughts, feelings? Otherwise, I will give you about 3 minutes of your super sunny lunchtime. I really hope that it's been useful. Let me know, book some time in my calendar if that's helpful to you. And otherwise, there will be more within this session, within these forums. It's a series. They're all free. You can come to as many as you like, and I'll be releasing more on different topics that we will be covering. So I mentioned that blind spots for high performers, but we'll also be covering some other topics. Like, Zoom loves the idea of other topics. Always does that with my thumbs up. But yes, feel free to come and talk about. I'll do some sessions on boundaries. I'll be doing a session on perfectionism as well. So I hope to see you there. Thank you all so much, and see you soon.